The night was cold and silent when Jack returned to his small cabin on the edge of the alien forest. He had spent the whole day hauling supplies from the nearby outpost, and his body ached for rest. The wind howled outside, carrying strange whistles and growls from creatures that lived deep among the glowing trees. He opened the creaky door, expecting darkness and quiet. But instead, he froze in shock. Someone was in his bed. A small figure curled up beneath his blanket. Her silver hair spread across his pillow like a shimmering river. Her skin was pale with a faint blue tint, glowing softly under the dim cabin. Light, she wasn't human, Jack could tell at a glance. Her ears were pointed and delicate, her eyes half open and reflecting the light like two pieces of polished metal. The girl looked up at him. Startled, but not afraid, her voice was quiet. Trembling. Please. Don't make me leave. Jack stood in the doorway, his mind racing. He had seen alien traders, soldiers, and wanderers before, but never someone this small. This fragile-looking, she couldn't be more than a teenager, maybe even younger, and yet there was something in her gaze. Oh wait, a fear she tried to hide. This is my bed, Jack said, keeping his tone calm. The girl clutched the blanket tighter, shaking her head. If I move, they will find me. Her words sent a strange chill through him. Jack stepped closer, his boots creaking against the wooden floor. She flinched but didn't let go of the blanket, her thin fingers gripping it like it was her last shield. Who's they? He asked. She didn't answer. Her silver eyes darted toward the window, as if expecting something to appear in the darkness. Jack glanced outside, but saw nothing. Only the endless black forest swaying under the alien moon. Still, the wind carried an odd sound like a faraway howl mixed with a metallic echo. It made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Jack sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His bed wasn't big, and this girl was clearly not leaving anytime soon. If he forced her out, she might run into whoever wore whatever she was hiding from. If he let her stay, he might be inviting danger right into his home. But the way she sat there, shivering in the blanket, made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. The urge to protect. You can stay for tonight, he said finally. The girl's shoulders relaxed, and she sank deeper into the blanket. Jack lit the small heater in the corner. It's soft hum filling the silence. He lay down on the other side of the bed, keeping as much distance as possible. But soon he felt movement. The girl had shifted closer. At first, he thought she was just trying to keep warm, but then she reached out and lightly touched his arm. Her hand was cold, trembling. Jack turned his head. Meeting her eyes, she whispered, "It's easier to sleep when you're near." It was such an odd, innocent thing to say that Jack didn't know how to respond. Outside, the wind grew stronger, rattling the cabin walls. Jack listened to it, wondering if the strange sound he had heard earlier would return. The girl's breathing became slow and steady, her grip on his arm loosening just a little. He didn't know who she was, what trouble she carried, or why she had chosen his cabin as her hiding place. But one thing was clear. Tonight, she felt safe here. Jack closed his eyes, though sleep didn't come easily. He kept hearing faint noises, twigs snapping, leaves rustling in between the gusts of wind. Once, he thought he saw a shadow pass across the window. But when he looked, there was nothing. He wondered if it was his tired mind playing tricks or if the girl's pursuers were already close. The heater clicked softly in the background, giving the small room a fragile warmth. The alien moonlight spilled through the cracked curtains, casting silver shapes on the walls. Jack lay still, letting the girl rest. But every muscle in his body stayed tense. He didn't know it yet, but this night was only the beginning. The forest outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something, and somewhere out there, in the endless dark, eyes were watching. The pale light of dawn slipped through the curtains. Casting soft lines across the wooden floor, Jack opened his eyes slowly. The stiffness in his back reminding him that he hadn't slept well. At first, he thought the events of last night were just a dream, but then he felt it. A small hand still resting lightly on his arm. The tiny alien girl was curled up beside him. Her breathing slow and steady. Her silver hair was tangled, and the faint blue glow of her skin was dimmer in the morning light. Jack lay still for a moment, studying her. She looked peaceful now, but her face carried the traces of fierce small lines at the corners of her eyes. The way her lips pressed together even in sleep. He gently slid his arm free and got up. Moving quietly to avoid waking her, the cabin felt colder than usual. So he added fuel to the heater. The smell of warm metal and burning coils filled the air. Jack poured himself a cup of bitter coffee from the old tin pot, but he couldn't stop glancing at her. What was she doing here? Why him, and what danger followed? Her into his home. His thoughts were interrupted when she stirred, her eyes blinking open. For a second, she looked disoriented. Then she sat up quickly, scanning the room as if checking it was still safe. "You're still here?" she said softly, almost as if it surprised her. Jack raised an eyebrow. "It's my cabin." She gave a small nod, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. The way she clung to it told him that even a small thing like warmth felt precious to her. Jack placed a plate of bread and dried fruit on the table. "You should eat," he said. She hesitated, glancing at the food and then at him. "It's for me, unless you see someone else here," he replied. Trying to keep his voice neutral, slowly she slid out of the bed and took a seat. Her movements light, almost cautious. She ate in small bites, like someone used to rationing every crumb. "Are you going to tell me your name?" Jack asked between sips of coffee. The girl froze mid-bite, her silver eyes meeting his. "Not yet," she said finally. "Names are dangerous." Jack frowned. "Dangerous? How?" "If they have your name, they can find you anywhere," she whispered. Her voice carried no hint of a joke, and something about the way she said it made him believe her. A sudden noise outside made her flinch. Jack turned toward the window, spotting movement near the tree line. It was too far to make out details, just a shadow slipping between the glowing trunks when he looked back at her. Her hands were clenched tightly on the table, her breathing shallow. "They're here," she said, her voice trembling. Jack kept his tone steady. "Who?" She didn't answer, only stared at the window like a cornered animal. Jack's instincts told him she wasn't imagining it. He grabbed the old hunting rifle from the wall and loaded it. The familiar click echoing in the quiet cabin. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "If someone's coming for you, you'll have to go through me first." Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in something else. Something like trust. It was strange, Jack thought. He'd known her for less than a day, yet she seemed to believe in him more than in her own chances of survival. The rest of the morning passed in tense silence. Jack kept watch from the window, while she sat on the bed, pulling the blanket around her like armor. Every sound outside a bird call, a snapping branch, made her jump. By midday, she spoke again, her voice quiet. "I didn't mean to take your bed." Jack glanced at her. "I figured as much. It felt safe," she said, her gaze fixed on the floor. "No one's felt safe in a long time," she added under her breath, as if talking more to herself than to him. When night came again, the wind picked up, bringing with it that strange, metallic howl Jack had heard before. This time, he saw her reaction clearly. Her entire body stiffened, her hands shaking. Without asking, she moved closer to him as they lay in the small bed. Jack felt her grip his arm again, holding on tightly. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. Her voice came back in a whisper. "I'm not afraid when you're here." The words were simple, but they carried a strange weight. Jack didn't know what kind of life she'd had before this, but he was sure of one thing. Whoever was after her was dangerous, and if they found her, it wouldn't end well. The cabin creaked as the wind roared outside. Jack lay awake, feeling the warmth of her small form against his side. It was strange he didn't know her name, her story, or even why she had come to him. But he knew, deep in his gut, that letting her go wasn't an option anymore. The forest seemed to be closing in around them, hiding shadows that waited for the right moment to strike. And somewhere out there, those shadows were moving closer. The morning sky was heavy with low clouds. Their color, a strange mix of gray and green. Jack stepped outside with his rifle. Scanning the edge of the forest, the ground was damp from a light rain during the night, and fresh tracks marked the soil. They were large, clawed, and deep, made by something heavy and fast. The tiny alien girl stood in the doorway, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. When she saw the prints, her face went pale. "They've found me," she whispered. Jack crouched to examine the tracks, his brow furrowed. The claws were sharper than any local animal he'd seen, and the stride was too long for a normal predator. He looked back at her. "You're going to have to tell me what's following." She bit her lip, hesitating, then stepped out into the chilly air. "They're not animals," she said quietly. "They're mercenaries, hunters trained to track and catch people like me." Jack straightened, gripping the rifle tighter. "People like you." She nodded. "My kind. We have something they want, something inside us." Jack didn't press her for more. He could see how difficult it was for her to even speak. But the pieces in his mind were starting to form a picture. This wasn't just a lost girl running from trouble. This was someone being hunted for a very specific reason. And those hunters were close. They went back inside, but the air in the cabin felt different, now charged, tense. Jack began checking the locks on the doors and windows. Reinforcing the shutters, the girl stayed near him, watching silently as he worked, every so often. She glanced toward the window as if expecting a shadow to pass by. By midday, the wind had died down, leaving an eerie stillness. Jack sat at the table, cleaning his rifle while she sat on the bed, legs pulled up to her chest. "Why me?" asked suddenly, not looking at her. She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You could have hidden anywhere," Jack said. "Why choose my cabin?" For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she said softly, "Because you're not like the others." Jack looked up, frowning. "You don't even know me." She gave a faint, almost sad smile. "I don't have two people carry a certain feeling, and yours told me I'd be safe." Before Jack could reply, a sharp sound broke the silence. A snap of wood, close enough to make both of them turn toward the window. Jack rose instantly, grabbing his rifle through a gap in the shutters. He caught sight of movement, tall, dark figures slipping between the trees, their armor reflecting faint green light. "Get down," Jack ordered, his voice low but firm. The girl slid to the floor, pressing herself into the corner, her blanket falling away to reveal thin arms marked with faint scars. Jack's pulse quickened. The hunters were real, and they were here. One of the figures stepped closer, and Jack got a better look. Its helmet was sleek and insect-like, with glowing red lenses for eyes. It carried a long, curved weapon that hummed softly. Another figure joined it, scanning the cabin with a slow, deliberate sweep. Jack kept his breathing steady. He'd faced danger before, wild animals, armed thieves, but there was something about these hunters that felt colder, more calculated. They weren't searching out of anger or hunger. They were on a mission. Minutes dragged like hours until the figures finally moved back into the trees. But Jack knew they weren't leaving. They were circling, testing, waiting for the right moment. The girl's voice broke the silence, trembling. "They'll come at night." "They always come at night." Jack turned to her. "Then we'll be ready." She shook her head. "You don't understand. They don't stop as the sun began to sink. Jack prepared. He set extra locks on the doors, blocked the weaker windows with furniture, and placed a few crude traps outside. The girl helped in small ways, passing him nails. Holding a lantern, though, her hands shook the entire time. When darkness finally settled over the forest, the silence was heavier than before. Jack sat near the door with his rifle across his knees. The girl stayed close, her eyes fixed on the single candle between them. Every flicker of the flame cast strange shadows on the walls. Then it happened. A soft crunch of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate. Jack motioned for her to stay down. The sound grew closer, joined by another, then another, until it surrounded the cabin. The girl's breathing quickened. "They're here," she mouthed. Jack raised his rifle, every nerve in his body sharp and ready. He knew the night was about to turn violent, and there was no guarantee either of them would see the sunrise. The silence outside the cabin was so deep it felt unnatural. Jack sat with his rifle ready, every muscle tight. The small alien girl stayed in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide and unblinking. The candle on the table flickered, its small flame fighting against the darkness. Then, a sharp scrape against the outer wall. Jack's head snapped toward the sound. Another scrape followed, this time on the opposite side. They were moving around the cabin, testing the walls. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "They're marking the weak spots." Jack didn't ask how she knew. Her tone told him. She'd seen this before. He crept to the window and peered through the narrow gap in the shutters. Two glowing red lenses stared back at him from the shadows. He jerked back just as something heavy slammed against the door. The girl gasped and clutched the blanket tighter. Jack stepped into the middle of the room, gun raised. A second slam shook the wooden frame. Then came the sound of glass shattering. One of the side windows exploded inward, shards scattering across the floor. A dark figure climbed through, its armor gleaming in the candlelight. It was tall and lean, moving with a predator's grace. Jack fired without hesitation. The blast echoed in the small space, the creature stumbling back with a metallic grunt. Before Jack could fire again, another shape appeared at the broken window. He swung the rifle toward it, but the first hunter lunged, grabbing the barrel. They struggled, the gun twisting between them. The girl screamed. Jack drove his boot into the hunter's chest, forcing it back through the shattered frame, but the attack didn't stop. A heavy thud came from the roof. Someone had landed above them. Dust rained from the ceiling as the wood creaked under the weight. Jack grabbed a small hatchet from the wall, tossing the rifle to the side for a moment. He moved toward the girl, keeping himself between her and the noise above. A loud crash. Part of the roof gave way, and a hunter dropped into the room, its weapon glowing with a strange blue light. Jack swung the hatchet, the blade glancing off the hunter's armor with a dull clang. The hunter struck back, its weapon slicing the air inches from Jack's face. The smell of ozone burned his nose. The girl suddenly darted from her corner, grabbing the lantern from the table before the hunter could turn to her. She smashed it against its helmet. Flames burst across the metal, the creature staggering back. Jack didn't waste the chance. He drove the hatchet into the hunter's side, and it fell heavily to the floor. Outside, more footsteps closed in. They were coming fast now, more testing the walls, no more waiting. Jack yanked the girl toward the back door. "Move," he ordered, his voice sharp but steady. They pushed into the cold night air, the forest looming around them. The wind carried strange whispers, like distant voices speaking in a language Jack didn't understand. The girl stumbled, but Jack kept her moving. Behind them, the cabin door splintered under a final blow. Shouts in that same alien tongue rang out. The hunters had taken the cabin now. They would come for them. They ran through the trees, Jack's boots crunching over frost-covered leaves. The girl's bare feet made almost no sound. but her breathing was quick and shallow. Once, Jack risked a glance back to glowing red lights were weaving between the trunks, gaining on them. "Don't look back." The girl panted. "They can smell fear." Jack didn't know if that was true. But he didn't argue. They reached a shallow stream, its water dark under the moon. Jack waded in. Pulling her along, the icy current bit into his legs, but it would help mask their trail on the other side. They climbed up a slope littered with moss and roots. At the top, Jack paused to listen. The forest was alive with sound now, branches snapping, distant roars, the hiss of something mechanical. "They'll keep coming," the girl said, clutching his sleeve. Jack looked down at her. Silver eyes were wide, but there was a spark, their stubbornness that matched his own. "Then we'll keep running," he said, but even as he spoke, he knew they couldn't run forever. The hunters had numbers, speed, and technology. He had one rifle, a hatchet, and the will to keep her alive. Somewhere in the dark, he'd have to find a way to turn the hunt around, because if they stayed prey for much longer, the forest would become their grave. The forest swallowed them whole. Tall trees rose like dark towers, their glowing leaves casting strange patterns on the ground. The air was thick with mist, making every sound sharper, every shadow more threatening. Jack kept moving, pulling the tiny alien girl by the hand. Behind them, faint red lights flickered in the distance, too far to strike, but close enough to remind them they were still being hunted. They had been running for what felt like hours. Jack's breath came in heavy bursts, his legs aching, but he didn't slow down. The girl stumbled over a root, and he caught her before she fell. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her voice was weak. I can keep going." They moved deeper into the forest until the sound of rushing water reached them. A wide river cut through the land, its surface shining under the alien moon. Jack knew crossing it could buy them time. The water might hide their scent or confuse the hunters' tracking devices. He stepped in first, the cold making him hiss through his teeth. The current was strong, but not enough to sweep them away. "Hold on to me," he told her, and she clung to his side as they waded across. Halfway through, a distant howl rose. Behind them, the girl's grip tightened. "They've picked up our trail again." Jack didn't answer. He was too busy pushing forward when they reached the far bank. Both of them were soaked and shivering. Jack led her to a cluster of thick bushes and crouched low, listening. For several minutes, there was only the sound of the river. Then, faint splashes from the direction they'd just come. The hunters were crossing too. Jack knew they couldn't rest yet. They pushed on, weaving between giant roots and strange flowers that glowed faintly. Now and then, Jack caught the sound of something moving parallel to them in the trees, a shadow keeping pace. The girl noticed too, her eyes darting nervously. "They don't always come in straight lines," she whispered. "Sometimes they drive you where they want you to go." That thought made Jack's stomach tighten. If the hunters were hurting them, it meant there was an ambush ahead. He stopped, scanning the terrain. To the left was a steep slope. To the right, a tangle of fallen trees and thorns. The only clear path was straight forward, the perfect place for a trap. "Change of plan," Jack muttered. He guided her toward the slope, helping her climb over slippery rocks. The ground was unstable, and more than once she nearly lost her footing. Jack stayed close, one hand ready to catch her. By the time they reached the top, both were breathing hard. They found a shallow cave hidden by hanging vines. It wasn't much, but it offered cover inside. The air was cool and still, the walls glistening with moisture. Jack set down his rifle and checked the girl for injuries. Her small feet were scraped and raw, and he tore a strip from his shirt to wrap them. She watched him work silently, then said, "No one's ever done this for me before." Jack looked up, frowning. "No one." She shook her head, her silver hair catching the faint light. "People only helped me when they could get something in return," she said. But you're different. Jack didn't know how to reply. He just tightened the bandage gently and said, "You're safe as long as I'm here." They stayed in the cave until the first hint of dawn touched the horizon. Jack didn't sleep. He kept watch at the entrance. At one point, the girl curled up beside him, resting her head lightly against his arm. Her warmth was small but grounding. For a few minutes, the world outside felt far away, but then, a low hum drifted through the forest. Jack recognized it instantly, the sound of the hunter's scanners sweeping the area. The girl stirred, her eyes snapping open. "They're close," she whispered. Jack grabbed his rifle and pack. "Then we move again." They slipped out of the cave, heading toward higher ground. The morning light filtered weakly through the mist. Bird-like creatures called out in sharp bursts, then went silent all at once. It was a warning. Jack glanced over his shoulder and caught a flash of red through the trees. "They've found us," he said. Picking up the pace, the chase began again, faster and more desperate. Roots snagged their feet. Branches scratched their arms. But they didn't stop. Each breath burned in Jack's chest, each step heavier than the last. The girl's face was pale, but she kept up, her determination matching his, somewhere in the back of his mind. Jack realized this wasn't just about getting away anymore. This was about finding a way to end it, because running forever was not an option. And if they kept moving without a plan, sooner or later the hunters would close in for good. The morning mist was beginning to fade when Jack and the alien girl finally slowed their pace. They had reached a ridge overlooking miles of dense forest, the river winding like a silver ribbon far below. For the first time since they fled the cabin, there was no sound of footsteps behind them, no flicker of red lights in the trees. But Jack didn't relax. He knew the hunters were still out there. Searching, waiting, they found a fallen log to rest against. Jack set down his rifle and took a drink from his canteen before handing it to her. She sipped carefully, as if water was something rare, then passed it back. For a while, they sat in silence, the only sound the distant rush of wind through the treetops. Finally, Jack spoke. "You've been running for a long time, haven't you?" She nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Since before I can remember," she said softly. "My whole life has been hiding, moving, never stopping." Jack studied her face. The way her silver eyes seemed older than the rest of her. He leaned forward, voice firm but gentle. "If I'm going to protect you, I need to know why they're after you." She hesitated, her hands twisting the edge of the blanket she still carried. "I didn't tell you before because once you know, you'll be in more danger than ever." Jack gave a short, humorless smile. "I think I passed that point 2 nights ago." The girl drew in a deep breath, as if the air itself was heavy. "My name is Arya," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I am the last of my kind." Jack's brow furrowed. "The last?" She nodded, her gaze lowering. "There were once millions of us across many worlds, but a war came. And in the end, my people were wiped out. Only I remain." Jack felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "And these hunters?" he asked. "They work for those who ended my race," Arya replied, her voice trembling. "But they don't just want to finish the job. They want what's inside me." She pressed a small hand to her chest. "My blood carries the key to bringing my people back, creating an army of them under their control." Jack stared at her, the truth sinking in. This wasn't just about keeping a child safe. This was about stopping a weapon that could change the balance of power across the galaxy. "Why didn't you go to someone for help?" "The authorities? Another planet." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Because there's no one left to trust. Even those who claim to protect me. Sell me to the highest bidder." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried the cry of a distant bird. And somewhere far below, The forest shifted like a restless animal. Jack finally said, "All right. Then, I guess we make our own plan." Arya's eyes widened. You? You still want to help me? Even now, especially now, Jack said, because now I know exactly what's at stake. They moved on, heading along the ridge to avoid. Leaving easy tracks, Jack kept scanning the forest below, looking for any sign of movement. By midday, they found a narrow cave entrance half hidden by vines. It was dark and cramped inside, but it offered shelter and a place to think. Jack lit a small torch from his pack. The warm light flickering over the stone walls, Arya sat across from him. Her knees drawn up. "You don't have to stay with me," she said quietly, "if you leave now. You might still get away before they find us again." Jack shook his head. "Not going to happen." Her silver eyes glistened. "You'll die for me. I'll fight for you," Jack corrected. "There's a difference, the air between." Them grew still, the weight of unspoken fears hanging there. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing with it a faint mechanical hum. Jack froze, tilting his head to listen. The hum grew louder, joined by a low, pulsing rhythm scanners sweeping the area they're near. Arya whispered, her voice trembling. Jack snuffed out the torch, plunging them into darkness. In the pitch black, he could hear the hunters moving slow, careful, methodical. They were getting closer, their equipment sending faint sparks of red light through the vines at the cave's entrance. Jack leaned close to Arya, speaking barely above a breath. "We can't run now. They'll see us in the open." We wait. Minutes crawled by, every heartbeat louder than the last. One shadow stopped right outside the entrance, its red lenses scanning the vines. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle, ready to fire the second they stepped inside. But after a tense pause, the figure moved on, its footsteps fading into the distance. Arya exhaled shakily, and Jack knew the reprieve wouldn't last. Sooner or later, the hunters would find them. And when they did, there would be no more running. He looked at her in the faint light filtering through the vines. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we stop hiding." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I mean we end this. "We take the fight to them," Jack said, his voice like steel. Arya didn't answer right away, but slowly, a spark lit in her gaze. Not just hope, but something fiercer. If tomorrow was going to be the end, she was ready to face it by his side. The first light of dawn crept across the ridge, turning the mist into a pale golden haze. Jack stood at the edge of the cave, checking his rifle one last time. Arya was beside him, wrapped in the blanket but standing tall, her silver eyes steady. She no longer looked like a frightened runaway. She looked like someone ready to face her fate. "You still have time to change your mind," Jack said. Arya shook her head. "No more running." Her voice was calm, but Jack could hear the undercurrent of fear. It was the same fear he felt, but fear wasn't going to stop them. They moved quietly through the forest, heading toward a rocky clearing Jack had spotted from the ridge. It was open, with good sight lines, and surrounded on three sides by high ground. If the hunters wanted to corner them, they'd have to step right into the trap. Jack set a few improvised explosives, just small charges from his pack, hidden under leaves and stones. Arya helped, placing them where she knew the hunters were most likely to advance. "How do you know they'll come here?" Jack asked. "They follow patterns," Arya explained, "always pushing prey toward a place they've already chosen. So this time, we choose it first." By midday, the forest was still. Jack and Arya crouched behind a fallen tree, waiting. The sun was warm, but the air felt heavy. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a footstep, every bird cry like a warning. Then the hum of scanners rolled through the trees. Jack saw the first flash of red light between the trunks. 3 hunters emerged from the shadows, moving in a slow, precise formation. They scanned the clearing, their voices crackling through helmets in that strange, metallic language. Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. But he waited. More shapes appeared. 6 now, maybe more. They stepped into the open, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Jack glanced at Arya. Giving a small nod, she returned it, her hand hovering over the detonator. The lead hunter took one more step forward. A thunderous boom split the air. The first charge exploded beneath their feet, sending dirt and smoke into the sky. 2 hunters went down immediately, their armor scorched and cracked, the rest scattered. Firing blindly into the trees, Jack popped up from cover, firing in short, precise bursts. 1 hunter dropped. Another staggered back, sparks flying from its chest plate. Arya triggered a second charge, blasting a group that had tried to flank them. The forest filled with the smell of burning metal and the sharp hiss of damaged equipment. But the hunters didn't retreat. They regrouped quickly. Pressing forward despite the losses, one leaped over the fallen tree, landing only a few feet from Arya. Jack swung the rifle like a club, slamming it into the hunter's helmet and knocking it sideways. Arya grabbed a loose rock and struck the side of its neck joint, the armor giving way with a sickening crack. The fight turned brutal, close, and desperate. Jack used every ounce of strength, blocking, striking, firing. Arya moved with surprising speed, ducking under blows, distracting enemies so Jack could take the shot. Then the leader stepped into the clearing. It was taller than the rest, its armor marked with crimson lines. In its hand was a long spear that pulsed with a dangerous blue light. "You are surrounded," it said in a deep synthetic voice. Jack leveled his rifle. "Then, I guess we save time and finish it here." The leader lunged, the spear slashing through the air. Jack barely dodged, the blade cutting into the tree behind him. They circled each other, trading blows, steel against energy. Arya darted behind the leader, searching for an opening. The fight ended in a single sudden moment. The leader raised its spear for a killing strike. Jack caught the shaft, holding it back with every bit of strength he had. Arya jumped onto its back, driving the last explosive charge into the gap between its armor plates. She leaped away, and Jack shoved the leader back. The explosion ripped through the clearing, the leader collapsing in a smoking heap. The remaining hunters froze, their formation breaking without their commander. They retreated into the trees, vanishing into the mist for a long moment. The clearing was silent, except for Jack and Arya's ragged breathing. Then Arya let out a shaky laugh, part relief and part disbelief. "They're gone," she said, her voice almost too soft to hear. Jack looked at the fallen leader, then at the smoke rising into the sky. "For now," he replied, "but they'll come back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but they will." Arya stepped closer, her small hand wrapping around his. "Then we'll be ready," she said. Jack studied her face, no longer just the frightened girl who had taken his sleeping spot. She was something more now, and so was he. They turned toward the forest, walking side by side. The danger wasn't gone. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since this began, they weren't just running, they were moving forward, together, toward whatever came next.